Tonight, we'll debate the debate. Who won, who lost, and did it move the needle? Then, gun control, one of the major issues on the stage last night in Houston. Will D.C. finally do something to deal with the surge in gun violence plaguing this country? Also, the administration continues to gut environmental protections. We're going to show you how it's impacting the water you drink, the air we breathe, and the land we live on. Evening, everybody. Welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. The third Democratic debate in the books, and another one is coming just in a few weeks. We're going to show you the highlights or lowlights, depending on your perspective, in a minute. But first, a couple of facts and figures. Frontrunner Joe Biden, he got the most airtime. He spoke for more than 17 minutes. Liz Warren, second at 16. And as you can see, Cory Booker, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, rounding out the top 5. Andrew Yang got the least airtime. Now, less than half the amount, in fact, of the top 5. But he did offer to give out free money, so I guess he gets some points for that, assuming it's even legal. Now, the debate, it was heavy on the issues and light, though, surprisingly, at least to me, on the fireworks. Healthcare got the most airtime by far, followed then by guns, immigration, foreign policy, civil rights, and education. Here, some of the clips from last night in Houston.
After brief calls for unity, the candidates were quick to clash over the top issue for voters, health care.
And if you notice, nobody's yet said how much it's going to cost the taxpayer.
Frontrunner Joe Biden embracing Obamacare and challenging Senator Elizabeth Warren's plan for Medicare for all.
I know that the senator says she's for Bernie. Well, I'm for Barack.
On Medicare for all, costs are going to go up for wealthier individuals, and costs are going to go up for giant corporations. But for hardworking families across this country, costs are going to go down.
Senator Bernie Sanders also defending his plan.
Every study done shows that Medicare for all is the most cost-effective approach to providing health care to every man, woman, and child in this country. I, who wrote the damn bill, if I may say so.
That explanation not enough for Senator Amy Klobuchar.
And while Bernie wrote the bill, I read the bill. And on page 8 of the bill, it says that we will no longer have private insurance as we know it.
But Biden's plan also came under attack. Former Housing Secretary Julian Castro seeming to play the age card.
They do not have to buy in.
You just said that. You just said that 2 minutes ago. You just said 2 minutes ago that they would have to buy in.
And if she qualifies for Medicaid,
are you forgetting what you said 2 minutes ago?
Be in for it.
Are you forgetting already what you said just 2 minutes ago?
But there are questions about whether Castro mischaracterized Biden's plan. But at times, Biden did seem out of touch, like when he encouraged parents to use technology to keep their children stimulated.
Play the radio. Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night.
The candidates on the wings eager to stand out. Entrepreneur Andrew Yang with a new take on his plan to give $1,000 a month to every American.
My campaign will now give a freedom dividend of $1,000 a month for an entire year to 10 American families. Someone watching this at home right now. It's original, I'll give you that.
And on gun violence, former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke, praised for his handling of the El Paso shooting, doubled down on his call for mandatory gun buybacks.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. We're not going to allow it to be used against our fellow Americans anymore.
And on the issue of race, Senator Kamala Harris facing tough questions on criminal justice reform.
When you had the power, why didn't you try to affect change then?
I made a decision that if I was going to have the ability to reform the system, I would try to do it from the inside. Was I able to get enough done? Absolutely not.
Over and over again, she took on Trump.
You know, he reminds me of that guy in The Wizard of Oz. You know, when you pull back the curtain, it's a really small dude.
Biden also forced to defend his record on immigration, pressed on deportations during the Obama administration.
The president did the best thing that was able to be done at the time. How about you? I'm the vice president of the United States.
Castro quick to call out Biden.
I mean, he wants to take credit for Obama's work, but not have to answer to any questions. I mean,
Mayor Pete Buttigieg calling for a ceasefire among the candidates.
Yeah, this reminds everybody of what they cannot stand about Washington, scoring points against each other.
Now, I may not be the loudest person up here, but I think we've already got that in the White House. Houston, we have a problem.
Let's bring in Democrat strategist Roger Fisk. He joins us as a former campaign advisor for President Obama. First off, don't lie. Did you make it through all 3 hours of this?
I did not.
Yeah, nor did I. At least we're honest about that.
And thanks so much for having me, Richard.
Yeah.
But I did follow up and watch the last 30 or 40 minutes this morning.
Okay. For me, first off, I thought Castro was at one point going to try and take the car keys away from Biden. I was a little surprised how it played out today. And I'll admit I'm one of, you probably be in the same category. I want an adult in the White House. I'm exhausted by the last 3 years. I don't want on-the-job training, and I don't want pie-in-the-sky plans with no chance of passage. All that said, I think like a lot of people, I'd be prepared to grade Biden on a curve. But there were moments last night that I winced a few times. Are you surprised how much he seemingly has lost on his fastball?
Well, it's very odd how some weaknesses can become strengths in some ways, because the one thing that the former vice president has in his favor is that he's made a series of odd, stumbling kind of statements throughout his entire career. So if this was a new phenomena and it only surfaced in the last 6 or 9 months, that would be one thing, but you can think back through the decades when he said, kind of odd things. And so it's not a new development. I don't think it's evidence of some accelerated cognitive decay or anything like that.
To that end, I thought there was a few cheap shots from Congressman Castro, but I did think it was a legitimate point, which is, hey, you want to attach yourself to the Obama legacy every chance you can, but anytime there's something questionable that came out of that, deportations, even progress or lack thereof on guns, you can say, hey, I was just the VP, I didn't sit in the big chair. That said, is it a wise strategy for Biden to wrap his arms around the 8 years of the Obama presidency as much as possible?
I think it is wise, because ultimately this comes down to honesty and authenticity. And what people really do is it's a gut decision. They look at someone and they say, is this person who they say they are? And I think candidates make a huge mistake when they try to divorce themselves from various parts of their career or their record, because you're going to wear it anyway.
To that end, and maybe he just exposed it, or maybe he accelerated it, but one thing Trump proved throughout the whole debate process in the last presidential election was he talked almost nothing about issues. Everything was visceral. And as a result here, every soundbite the next day after the debate, and even the debate viewing numbers through the roof, because of that cult of personality thing. You contrast that to what we saw last night in the prior debates. It's about policy. And you and I might find it very substantive. I will tell you, after the first hour, my head was spinning with all the minutiae as to how their health care plans were really different or not. That said, I was waiting for somebody on the stage to basically pull a mini-me with a Trump and make it all about them, personality and everything else. Because maybe, as much as I'd hate to admit it, maybe it's not just a Trump-based phenomenon. Maybe that's what the public wants. Certainly, you'll get free TV out of it. Am I more right than wrong here or not?
No, you're definitely onto something, and I would throw Marianne Williamson into this conversation as well, because I believe it was in the last debate, or maybe the first debate, when she said, the hold that this president has on the American psyche is very dark and it's very strong. And you're right, there wasn't any kind of policy component to his campaign at all. It was grievance, it was victimization in the sense of like, someone did this to you. Someone took your hometown away. Someone took your job. Someone kept you from getting ahead. And anger is very, very easy as a marketing device. Yeah, I could do anger all day long. And I completely agree with you that when people think that this is just a policy kind of exercise, that they're not really getting their arms around how broad and how deep these elections really are in kind of the American character. The only moment last night to me that got close to kind of capturing a cultural moment in a kind of a snapshot way was the clear exasperation from former Congressman O'Rourke when he talked about, hell yes, we're going to take away the AR-15s and the AK-47s. That to me was like a broader kind of connection with where a lot of the country is right now.
And I'm so glad you went there, because that was my next question. Today you already see, Roger, you probably even know some of the folks, DNC, they're freaking out. You got Chris Coons, and I'm going to be talking to a gun control leading national advocate on this. I'm sure he's happy with what Rourke said, but Democrats are like, time out. All of a sudden, you're going to give a rallying cry that we're going to be kicking down doors, taking away guns. Even if that's not what O'Rourke said, that's how it's going to be translated. Was it good or bad politics, not just for O'Rourke, but more importantly for Democrats to go that far on an issue, even if the majority of the public would seem to agree with him?
Well, I'll connect my answer to my previous point, which is my takeaway from that moment was here was someone who was clearly frustrated with where the country is right now and was responding on just a very authentic, very visceral gut level. And I think that's why that moment really penetrated. Whether or not he can capitalize on this is to be determined. I think of any of the tiers in the race, he probably will come out of this with the only bump. And I have a couple theories about some other things, which is I think Senator Warren purposely kind of submitted somewhat of a downplaying kind of performance. Part of my interpretation of last night was that she was purposely scaling back her deliveries a little bit to hold on to the idea that she can control the pace of her growth and keep going up those 1 or 2 points every couple weeks, and then really bring this to a full boil in January. That was my kind of sense of why and how she behaved last night.
And Roger, finally, I think if somebody stood back and they watched just the last 72 hours, if you ever want to know the difference between the two political parties and their two approaches, Democrats are simultaneously, without even an incumbent, trying to be concerned about the national political party at the same time that they are trying to navigate how to say the word impeachment without saying the word impeachment. They look at the polls and overwhelmingly people want substantive gun control, but they've got to be really careful as to what words they say. And even if one candidate with 2% of the vote says one thing, all of a sudden they're trying to now nuance that. And then you go on the other side of it, and, you know, Trump might as well say that aliens have walked into the White House. I don't even think that would be the lead story tomorrow because we're just so inured to it all. We are in two completely different ways, at least when it comes to messaging and also fear of consequences with the two parties. Maybe it's always been that way, but I think never more so than where we are now.
Well, and this relates to the subject that you and I touched on a couple minutes ago in terms of like policy prescriptions and things like that. Trump ran against government. Trump ran, and look at his cabinet, for example. Rick Perry's job at the Energy Department is to weaken the Energy Department. The long parade of EPA administrators, their job has been to weaken the EPA. Secretary DeVos's role at the Department of Education is to weaken the Department of Education. Republicans don't believe that government has a role in this. So that was a huge thing for me last night. And I think it's also a challenge, which I think you're kind of touching on in a way, is Democrats can get too granular and too into specific policy proposals as if, you know, Senator Klobuchar's infrastructure plan is so different than Secretary Castro's and that either one of those plans are worth, you know, spending a lot of time about, and instead of really focusing on where the country is right now and getting people to re-engage and come back to like even just a modicum of faith in the government. Because I think for the most part, and you referenced your fatigue after the last 3 years, the cognitive decay that we've seen in the current occupant is so great. And the long list of ridiculous things that he says and does. One of the ironies of life is that I, in the last couple of months, have found myself actually advocating for a more robust GOP. Like, where is the fiscal discipline? Where is the patriotism? All those things, where are the family values that I used to campaign against because I always thought they were hollow? But now we desperately need because they're not even the GOP anymore. They're not the stoic law and order GOP that you and I grew up with, which we desperately kind of need right now.
Interesting. Well, Roger, I always appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard.
All right, everybody. As I mentioned, when we come back, the gun debate, it continues in D.C. We've got top senators negotiating with the president. But the question is, are they really making any progress? We're going to have an update on that after this break.